let's give them hell. There's a story you should know from 100 years ago, and 100 years we've waited now to tell. Now them Yankees come along, and they'll listen to this song, and they'll quake in fear to hear that rebel yell. And they'll quake in fear to hear that rebel yell. Yeah! Oh, the South gonna rise.
You went into feature filmmaking. Why?
Well, some people have it by accident, and that's what happened to me. If you want a quick history, I started as a school teacher. I was teaching English, literature, and the humanities in what I felt was the civilized way to live. But the civilized way to live is not necessarily the most profitable way to live. So I got into the world of advertising, and eventually through a whole bunch of circumstances that I will not bore you with at the moment, wound up as the television director at an advertising agency. In the course of shooting commercials, I wound up in a little film studio where the owner needed a partner. He was a marvelous technician, but he had very little business sense. His name was Marty Schmidhofer, and we formed what we call Lewis and Martin Films because Lewis and Schmidhofer would not have fit on the building. And eventually he joined the Cameramen's Union and moved out of town. This was in Chicago, moved to Florida, and here I am with this film studio trying to sell commercials. And I had bought 35 millimeter film equipment. When I first moved in with Marty, he only had 16 millimeter equipment, and the big advertising agencies would not work with us. They said they had to shoot in 35 millimeter. So I bought the 35 millimeter equipment, and I still went to California to shoot. This was in Chicago. Now what? I was bemoaning my fate to a friend one day, and he said, well, how do you make any money in the film business? And I said rather innocently, the only way to make money in the film business is to shoot features. He said, why don't you shoot features? Which is like saying, why aren't you rich?
Yes.
I have no answer to that. But it planted a seed. I said, nobody shoots features in Chicago. He said, nonsense, the industry was born here. He said, Charlie Chaplin shot his first movies in Chicago. So that's how I got into the film business. And in my first halting steps in the feature film business, I made nothing but mistakes. And as Shakespeare said, sweet are the uses of adversity, because that I survived despite that is in itself something of a miracle.
Well, and that implies too that there was some drive in you, at least to make money, if not to shoot feature films.
Well, that's the core. You see that a lot of contemporary would-be filmmakers don't seem to recognize. They are more concerned with artistry than they are with having somebody say, yes, I'll buy that DVD, or yes, I'll go to the movies and look at it, or yes, I'll rent that from Netflix. They are auteurs, not business people. And it's not that I pity them, I just think they're in a different world.
Well, how does boredom figure into all that? I mean, somehow in trying to make art, do we forget to entertain?
Yes,
sometimes.
Yes, I'll tell you why, Russ, because art is subjective. Entertainment is objective. And if I am writing movies to please myself, implicitly, I'm excluding many of the people out there who may not have the same background I have. And the trick in making a successful movie, whether it's a cheap, schlocky movie of the type that I made, or some of the contemporary epics that cost several $100 million and can lose half that amount. The difference is one between thinking outside and thinking inside.
Oh, way up there on Moonshine Mountain, that's where we make white lightning, 14 jugs without no counting. That's how we taste white lightning.
It strikes me, though, watching your films, that there's a great deal of joy, not only coming from your hand in it, but from the entire company that's working on it. Isn't joy as good a reason to make movies as art?
It's infectious, yes. Everybody on my set always had a good time. And I always felt that I would rather have someone who was cooperative than to have someone who felt that he or she was a genius. And making movies itself, it's like having malaria. You think you're over it, and it's lurking in the bloodstream.
Yes.
And it can flare up on you.
Well, I run a Grand Guignol Theater here in San Francisco. For 3 years now, we've had our own Grand Guignol Theater called the Hypnodrome. It blew my mind when I heard about the bloodshed. Could you tell us a little bit about
Sure,
your...
the bloodshed, in a sense, was fashioned very loosely after the original Grand Meal in France. I had decided to try my hand at theater operation. Eventually, I wound up with 3 conventional theaters, which just showed conventional pictures. But this was in an area of Chicago called Old Town, and it was an abandoned restaurant, which had several negatives relative to showing movies. First of all, in a typical theater, the seats are slanted so you can see over the person sitting in front of you. If it's this way, if the fellow in front of you is wearing a hat,
That's it.
dead fish. But it made no difference. I picked up 2 ancient projectors that had originally been on destroyers or battleships or whatever in World War II, where to show a 35 millimeter film, because that's the only thing that they had then, you had to have a projector that would handle that size film.
Yeah.
But you could not have an arc projector which could start a fire. So these were the original incandescent projectors. And I bought 2 of them.
Not very bright then?
Not very, well, I wasn't very bright. The projectors and I were totally in sync. So we moved these things in and we had a show. We'd show, the original Dracula with Bela Lugosi. And between reels, we had a fellow named Irving Vampire. And Irving Vampire would come out, between the lights would go up, and he would drag his associate across the stage, slit his throat, drag him off, and then we can continue with the movie. And for some strange reason, that brought people into the theater. It's an amazing thing what people will come to watch. Now, there's a difference between that and a very serious conguignol. Everybody knew it was a gag. And I feel today that one of the problems that attend some of the contemporary movies is that they want you to think that we're really killing this person. We're really torturing these people. We are really doing what we were. These are snuff films.
Yeah.
And I object to that.
Yeah.
It's just not my cup of tea.
Mix up corn with some old pork fat, that's how you begin. White lightning, add all the innards of an old poke cat, that's what's in white lightning.
To me, and I'm giving you a piece of philosophy that I know a lot of people in the horror film business don't share. To me, if the audience understands that you are having a good time, they have a good time. If the audience thinks you're being deadly serious, you had better entertain them beyond the level of just having organs ripped apart.
Yeah.
Because that's old hat now. And people begin to think that it's really not the right thing to do. The days of startling people are in eclipse. When we made Blood Feast, it was a different world. Because for Blood Feast, nobody had ever made a picture of that type before. No one had made a movie, for that matter, where people died with their eyes open.
Right.
Now it's very common, and the producers and directors outdo themselves trying to have gory effects. But as long as that is accompanied by an indication that this whole thing's a big gag, then the audience is with you, and they don't look for trouble. That's a key too. Somebody walks out of a theater, and it has nothing to do with the budget. Look at this movie, The Island, was that the name of it, that had cost $120 million or whatever, and they lost most of it? Star name value doesn't carry it. Production value doesn't carry it. Big budget doesn't carry it. Exotic locations don't carry it. What carries it is somebody coming out of the theater saying, hey, you gotta see that.
Yeah. With a grin on their face.
With a grin on their face.
Yeah. I've read in interviews you talking about the maze that you lead an audience through in a gore film. Are there ingredients to that, or is there a way you can kind of point us on the roadmap of what that maze looks like?
People are, let's suppose you put a rat in a maze. The rat will flounder around and eventually starve. But you give it a piece of cheese right here, and it goes to the cheese.
Yes.
And you open the gate and flash a light, and it goes through the gate. And you stick it with a prod, and it comes out the other end. Without that cheese, without that gate, without that prod, it's just a rat floundering around. With those items, the rat performs the way you want it to perform. Rather apt analysis of who we are, rat masters. In the case, let's say, of 2000 Maniacs, which is my personal favorite of the movies I've made, the movie opens on an uneven note. It's happy, and yet there's an overtone in there that people have to understand that something is going to happen. Now, unlike many of the other movies I made in which there's, bam, it opens with gore, because by that time they were looking for it.
Right.
In 2000 Maniacs, the plot advances, about 20 minutes before we have the first effect where this girl's finger is cut off. And then they cut her arm off, which is, so what? It's only an actress. And then they roast this thing over a fire. And people looking at this, in today's marketplace, they do what they were supposed to do then. They laugh. Because they know the whole thing is a gag. In the case of the Gorgor Girls, which is as far out as a movie I would ever dare to make, because at the time I shot that, I felt that because the major film companies began to say, how long has this been going on?
Yes.
And they were invading my turf with things I didn't have. They had budget. I didn't have budget. They had name actors. I didn't have name actors. They had effects people instead of the chicken skin and the department store mannequins I was using. So I said, okay, it may be time to get out. Let's just go over the top.
Yes.
And
that was with humor and flesh?
humor and flesh combined,
Yeah.
not deadpan. I really think that here we are deep in the 21st century, and the industry should have movies that are not totally deadpan from front to back, not of this type, because that's been there, done that.
Robert E. Lee broke his musket on his knee, and 1,000 pieces shattered on the ground. But he looked up then, and he gathered up his men, and from his lips there came an awful sound. And from his lips there came an awful sound. Yeah! Oh, the South's gonna rise again.
Were you always able to keep your mind on the budget, or were there occasions where you let things get out of control and as a result risk the kind of return that you were hoping for on the movie?
I'm hurt to have you, that's that.
It never happened, did it?
Couldn't happen, I'll tell you why. Because this was not that kind of movie. You see, one benefit of spending your own money is that you become totally budget conscious.
But it's gone.
You cannot call somebody else and say, I need more. So the result is that it becomes not a work of art, but a business venture. And when it's a business venture, you know on Monday morning what you're going to be shooting Thursday afternoon, or else you don't finish the film. And it's as simple as that, but people don't seem to. Another take, I hear about these directors who have 20, 30 takes. How's that possible? If you have people who are adequately either rehearsed or who themselves aren't victims of their own ego, as a lot of actors are, you make the shot. Oh, well, it wasn't what? You make the shot. Well, you make the shot. And today, there is no excuse for it. And my philosophy was and is, nobody walks out of a theater because you have a ragged pan. They walk out of a theater because they're not entertained. And I remember going to a multiplex, and here they had, this is a few years back, Eyes Wide Shut, that last Kubrick movie. And people were walking out, what else is showing here? Okay, budget had nothing to do with it, star name had nothing to do with it. Why did they do that? Why would they walk out on a movie that had Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman and directed by Stanley Kubrick? The answer is they were not entertained. And they don't care about some of the other things that the film people do care about. I've heard people say, well, your camera is often static. You don't have a lot of dolly shots in there. Who in the audience counts dolly shots? Yeah, I know how to do it, but the question is, if I'm on a limited time schedule, what's going to take precedence? Finishing the film, or setting up a dolly shot that's going to run to another day, or a half a day, or what?
Stonewall took a gun and he made the Yankees run, but he took a fatal bullet in the chest. As he fell down dead, old Stonewall said, I'm a-giving you a dying request. I'm a-giving you a dying request. Yeah! Oh, the South's gonna rise again. Yeah! Oh, the South's gonna rise.
You're always about what's next.
Well, that's the key. You look forward, not backward. I'm not going to make the great train robbery or Boys to the Moon or one of these. That's been done. What's next? And I don't want to be considered enough of an oddball that people will say, I don't know what the heck he's doing here. I want to be considered enough of an innovator that they would say, well, I haven't seen that kind of thing before, but I kind of like it. And it doesn't have to be a profound reaction. It can be almost subliminal. but I'll settle for whatever I can get.
Well, HD, it's been a great, great joy talking to you in the Blue Room at
Me too.
Amoeba.
Thank you. I had a great time.
Enjoy San Francisco.
I always do.
Oh, the South